Okay, we're at the top of 75A. Let's see. Uh, the first line, the end of the first line. Um, Picking up from where we left off yesterday, we had a brisa that said that if you have a ben pakua that's walking through a stream, then it becomes huchshar l'kabel tuma, and then if it goes and becomes tameh, then it's tameh. Um, Even if it is not born yet. Montana of Rabbanar Huchshar Halach Levesak Nitma. Who is this Tana? Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yossi Aglilihi. Titania. It's Rabbi Yossi Aglili, as he says in his Brisa. Rishim ben Lazar Amar Mishum Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Metame tumas ochlim. A ben pekua can get the tuma of food, so it's already considered a food, even though it's kind of a living being. But um, but it's already prepared for eating. But sorry, hechsher, but it does require hechsher tuma, meaning it has to come in contact with liquid, like any other food, before it becomes tameh. No, it's a live being, it's an animal, and a live animal doesn't contract tuma. Because it's alive. It doesn't tumas ochlin doesn't apply to a live animal. Okay, so um, Va'azda Rabbi Yochanan Latame. So it's Rabbi Yossi Aglili, because Rabbi Yossi Aglili is the one that says um, that the ben pakua can be eaten without shchita, and therefore that's why it can become tame even while it's still alive. So that brisa that we had before, that it has to first become muhshar for tuma, is according to Rabbi Yossi Glili. Vaz Rabbi Yochanan Latame. Rabbi Yochanan follows his this statement. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yossi Glili, Beis Shammai Amar Davar Echad. Rabbi Yossi Glili and Beis Shammai agreed about this one thing, that a if it's a live animal that can be eaten without shechita is considered food already for the purposes of becoming tameh. Rabbi Yossi Glili Hadamar, and so we just saw that in Rabbi Yossi Glili. What's the source for Beis Shammai? Beis Shammai, the Tanam, we have a Mishnah. Dagim me'emes ha'mekablim tuma. When do fish become tame, or becomes not become tame, but becomes susceptible to tuma? So as we said, a live animal or fish can't become tame of tuma sochlin. But at what point does the fish become susceptible to tuma? From the time that they're caught. So in other words, once they're caught, they're considered already, like their time is up. Basically, they're going to be eaten, and they're already considered food. No, Beis Hill says they have to actually be dead in order to be considered food. Rabbi Kiva Omer Misha Shein Yacholin Lichos, and Rabbi Kiva says kind of an in-between position. Um, at the point where even if you threw them back into the water, they wouldn't survive. Okay, so they're not quite dead yet, but they're basically, their fate is sealed, and now they're considered ochlin, and they become susceptible to tuma, according to Rabbi Kiva. So my now, what's the difference between Beis Hillel and Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Yochanan, Dag Mikartea Ikabenayu, a fish that's like thrashing around, that it's about to die. So according to Beis Hillel, it's not dead yet, and it's not food yet. And according to Rabbi Akiva, its fate is sealed, and it's considered already food. But the point is that Beis Shammai agreed with the view of Rabbi Yossi Aglili that as soon as they're caught, it's like the Ben Pakua. They don't need any further. They're already considered food once they've been hauled out of the sea. By Rav Chisda, noldu bedogim simane treifa. What if you have a fish that is treif? So it doesn't mean that it was shechted improperly. Of course, a fish does not need shechita. But what if you have a fish that is alive but is terminal? Okay, so in the corresponding case of an animal, shechita wouldn't help. In the case of a fish, like, do we consider it not kosher, or not? Sorry, not if it's not kosher. Do we consider it food already, susceptible to tuma? You can ask, according to both opinions, whether you hold that you hold a treif animal can live a long life, or whether you hold a treifa animal, a terminal animal, is going to die soon. Um, like within a short period. What the short period is discussed. It could be 30 days, could be 12 months, but whatever. Even if you hold that a treif animal can live a long life, Behema hu denefisha chayusa. Okay, so an animal, um, it has a, I don't know how to translate this exactly. Here he says a greater degree of viability. That it has a stronger hold on life. Okay, but fish which are less robust, maybe because it can't survive outside the water, but like an animal can't survive in the water. So I'm not sure what, how, I don't know how to understand what the Gemara is saying here is that fish are less viable than animals, but that's the statement of the Gemara.
What makes it the fish trace? It's
It has some kind of disease or a defect, or, it lost a gill or something, right? Something happened to it, either disease or trauma that makes it not viable. Okay,
oh,
so
was it a
now,
kosher animal? Was it a kosher fish?
yeah, we're talking about kosher fish that could, because it can be considered food. Actually, it could be a non. I don't know. It could be a non-kosher fish. I haven't really considered that. But let's say it's a kosher fish. So you can eat the fish, right? There's no halacha that a fish has to be slaughtered or it can't be a treifa. But the question is it already considered dead, in the sense of being considered it's already food and can become tame? Um, so that's one side of it. Odilma, maybe even if you think that the treif animal will not survive for a long time, and the fish is the same. So that applies to an animal where you have the idea of shchita, right? You have the idea that if it's treif, like then it's already dying, and shchita doesn't make it kosher, doesn't make it doesn't accomplish anything. But a fish, shavel dagim, dan shchita. There's no concept of shchita about a fish. So amala, maybe trefa, the whole idea of trefa doesn't apply to the fish. Okay,
When you say
so
it can be food to
mhm.
whom? If it's trafe for whatever the disease process, it's not food for a Jew, right? Do you mean food for
Well,
anybody?
no,
Food for
if
an animal?
no, a fish that's a kosher fish that's not viable, I think is still kosher, right?
Well, when we say trafe here, it's saying that it has a
Yes. So
disease.
treif in the popular lexicon means not properly slaughtered, or a treif. So it's like saying the fish has to be glatt kosher, right? This is no such thing, right? Glatt kosher
Right.
applies strictly to a mammal with lungs, with
Right.
but we use it colloquially. But here the Gemara is talking about the technical term of treifa, meaning it's not going to survive. Okay, it has some defect and it's not going to survive. So not a problem for a fish to be kosher, but maybe it, if it's not going to survive, we kind of consider it already dead and already edible, so it's already a machal, and it can already be made tame as a machal, even though it's
But if
still
it's
alive.
but if it's diseased, for instance, is it really considered food?
Depends on the disease, I guess.
Exactly. So if it's a poisonous disease, let's say it was infected, so is it edible?
Okay, fine. That's a good question. I would say maybe that would be a different case. Yeah, maybe you wouldn't consider that food because it's poison. But we're talking about a fish that is edible, that will be edible once it's dead and it's already dying. So is it considered food already? That's the essential case here. Versus teku.
So how does
Sure.
this? How does this? I mean, it seems that we learned that sort of concept as a novella, as a right, as opposed to a trefa.
Right.
Like
So, but the mhm.
when we saying, well, certainly with the behemoth, the concept of novella, where the animal dies of its own causes. So if this is why is this not a novella? Why do we call it a trefa with the fish, or is the fish different?
No, a nevela is an animal that's already dead and died without shchita.
Oh, it has to be already dead, not two
Nevela for sure.
seconds, not.
Nevela for sure.
I see. So, even though the animal is dying and it's going to die in 3 seconds, it's not yet an avela.
I believe that's correct. Yeah, but it is a trefa.
Okay, I mean, we would consider, at least with the behemoth, a trefa, an animal with a mum, right?
If it's a fatal moon, yeah.
Right. Uh, I don't know. I mean, the only well, there's a difference between glot and not glot, but
Oh, it
I
depends on
understand
depends
that.
on. Yeah, okay.
But that's why I'm thinking with the fish, if it's a trefa and it has a mum, so we're saying it's still edible. Whereas it with With a behema, the treifa means it has a mum that it's not
It's disqualified from shchita.
exactly.
Yeah. But
Um,
but since shchita doesn't apply to a fish in the first place, maybe we wouldn't say that about a fish.
well, I don't know if it's disqualified because doesn't the Gemara say earlier, a few dafim ago, and in other places that if its animal is a treifa, if we can shecht it, but it takes it out of it makes it tahor, right? Isn't that right? That treifa that shchita metahir a treifa, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
even if it's a treifa, the shchita, so then it doesn't once you do the shchita, it cannot be metame, right? So you can check the treifa animal as long as it's considered a kosher animal, right?
Well, that probably depends. I don't recall that Gemara, but it probably depends on this machlokas that's quoted here: treifa chaya or treifa ena chaya. Like, how long can a treifa survive? And if it can survive, if you hold it can survive a long time, but still disqualified from shchita, then maybe shchita can make it tahar.
Oh, well, okay. Well, I mean, it does say the
I'm not
Gemara
sure.
says
I'm not sure about that.
that's how a few dafim ago. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
repetition, not the first place it occurs, but that
Right.
with a treifa one can retire. So it's not like a nevela is metame,
Right.
but a treifa. But that's one of the distinctions the Gemara makes. That a treifa one can by shchita. It was a kosher animal. It
Hmm.
would have been a kosher animal before it became a treifa. But a treifa you can still shech the treifa and take it out of the category of matame something else.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know if I was on that daf or if I've encountered that before. Unfortunately I missed a lot of Chullin, but yeah, okay. I'm sure you're correct.
Well, in my own,
I will assume you're correct. Okay.
yeah.
All right. Hitila nefel, new topic. An animal has a miscarriage. Rabbi Yochanan Amar chelbo kechelev behema. What is the rule for the chelev of the fetus? So Rabbi Yochanan says it's usher like any chelev is usher. Rabbi Shimon Lakish Amar chelbo kechelev chaya. That it's still usher. So actually, the chelev of a behema is iser kares. The chelev of a chaya is just a lav. Wait a second. No, that's not right. Um, yeah, I'm sorry, I was right the first time. The chelev of a chaya is permitted. So is this animal, this miscarried fetus, is this considered like an animal, or is it not like an animal? And you could compare it to a chaya, which is a case where the chelev is permissible.
Isn't chaylev also isur? How's
Yeah, yeah,
chaylev?
yeah. The chelev of an animal, of a behema, as opposed to a chaya, is aser.
So how are we saying it's permitted here?
We're talking about a fetus. Right, so the fetus never, we'll explore a little bit, but the fetus never lived independently as an animal, right? It was in its mother's womb, so it wasn't like you could say that it wasn't the chalev of the mother. The chalev of the mother is the chalev. The fetus is something else, right? And so
Right.
chalev within the fetus, since it never existed as an independent animal, maybe it's mutter. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chelbo Kachelev Behema. So Rabbi Yochanan says it's aser, like a behema. Why? Avira Garim, because like once it's removed from the womb of the mother, even though it's dead, it's still considered an animal, a separate being, and it has chelev, so it's chelev of behema, which is aser like the chelev of any other behema. Rav Shimon ben Lakish Amar Chelbo Kachelev Chaya. Rav Shimon ben Lakish says no, it's not chelev of behema. Chadoshim Garme, because when does it become an animal with chalev? When it's born, right? When it completes its gestation, and this animal did not complete its gestation, and so it technically doesn't have chalev that is aser. Ikadiyamri, or some say that the dispute is as follows: Kol hechad kol chadshov. If the if it didn't complete its gestation, lo klumhu, then it's nothing. Everybody agrees that there's no chalev here. There's no aser chalev. Keep lige. What is the machlokas? Heichad de hoshit yadol behema. You put your hand inside the animal's womb. Fatalash chalev shal ben tisha chai. You have a viable fetus inside that's already 9 months. It's viable, just hasn't been born yet. You remove the chalev from the fetus. What about that? Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chalev behema. Rabbi Yochanan says it's a viable fetus. It's live. It's as if it were live. or we see it as an independent entity, and it has chaylev and a susser. Um, because Chadashim Garme, because it finished its 9 months, it just hasn't been born yet, and it's chaylev. Reb Shimon ben Lakish Amar Chelbo kechaylev chaya. No, it's mutter Chadashim va'avir Garme, because it has to complete its gestation and come out into the world as an independent being. Okay, so Ezer Yochanan Rish Lakish for Yochanan asks Machelev V'Shtei Klayos Hamuras Ba'asham Mutza Miklal Shalil. So you have the chalev and the two kidneys that are referred to in the Karban Asham, and it has to be an animal like a living independent animal and not a fetus. Avkol Mutza Miklal Shalil. So every Karban. Is excluded. A fetus is excluded. Um, so according to me, says Rabbi Yochanan, that the fetus is like a behemoth has chaylev. That's why it's hard to tell you. This is not, you would have thought that this is a viable animal and can be used for um, you can use its chalev and kidneys. Fine. Elodidach, but according to you, that it's not yet a behema, even if it's reached full term, but it hasn't been born or hasn't left the womb. Amai, what do you need a pasuk for? It's not a behema. It has nothing to do with the asham and
Yeah.
can't go on the mizbeach. Amalei tamididi nami mehacha. I actually also get this idea from the same place. In other words, because the Torah says that the chalev of the fetus can't be on the mizbeach, so I derive from that it's not even chalev, right? Like what the Torah is saying is, don't think this is chalev. You can't put this on the mizbeach. And by the way, what Rish Lakish deduces is, guess what? This isn't chalev, and so it's not usher to eat. Okay, Vikadam, right? Or is another view of this machlokas. Ezer Shimon ben Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Shimon ben Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan, "Ma chelu shtei klayos hamoras b'yashem mutzah miklal shlil." You see the chalev and the chalev and the two kidneys are not permitted on the mizbeach. So afkol mutzah miklal shlil. So I would say that about every carbon and every kidney and fat and every chalev of a fetus is not treated as chalev. That makes sense according to me, Reish Lakish. That's why the Torah says, don't put it on Mizbeach, because it's not really chalev. But according to you, you say that the chalev is really chalev, so why can't it go on the Mizbeach? Likarev, let it go on the Mizbeach. So he would answer Reish Lakish, because it's premature. It's still in the womb. So sure, I hold that this is real chalev. Why can't you put it on the Mizbeach? Because it's a fetus, right? It's not the animal. It's not the chalev from an animal, an independent animal, but from a fetus. That's why it doesn't go on the mizbeach, but it still can be considered chalev that you can't eat it. Amar Rabbi Yami. Hashochin is hatrefa umasa ba ben tishachai. You have a treifa animal. In other words, you just maybe you knew it before, or maybe you discovered once you did the shchita, but the animal does not uh, qualify for shchita. You did shchita, and then you find inside a live fetus, 9-month-old fetus. L'divrei ha'oser. If you think that a ben pekua has to. This is a ben pekua basically. So if you hold like Rav Meir in our Mishnah that requires its own shchita, mati. So that's fine. You can you can do shchita on the ben pekua and eat it. L'divrei amatir, but if you say that ben pekua doesn't need shchita, then oser, then the mother's shchita doesn't count, okay? Because the mother's shchita didn't really accomplish anything, because the mother was a treifa, so you can't say that the ben pekua inside her underwent shchita, because the shchita never was valid because of the status of the mother. Remember Rava says, L'divrei amatir nami mutar. Rava says, no. If you think that the ben pekua is mutar to eat without shchita, the same applies to the to this case, right? That you can eat it without further shchita. Why? Arba simanim al sheberachmana, because the Torah basically is with the halacha of ben pekua, it's saying that any of the two of any of the four of these passageways qualify for shechita. So whether it's the mother, even though the mother is a treifa, but you did a valid shechita on her, and the valid shechita can't apply to the mother because the mother's a treifa, but it can apply to the fetus. The same case, you do shechita on a mother that turns out to be a treifa, and there's a 9-month-old fetus, viable fetus in it. Ton shechita. It requires shechita. The child, the ben pekua, v'chayv bezro v'lachayim v'keva, and you have to give the matnos kahuna, right? That if you when you slaughter an animal, you have to give pieces of it to the kohen. Vim mace, and if the mother died without shechita, tahor milutame b'masa, then it doesn't have tumas nevela. Basically, you don't become tame by carrying it. Amalei Rabba. So Rabba said, "Ton shchita kaman." Whose opinion are you going with that it requires shchita in order to eat it? Rabbi Meir. That's Rabbi Meir in our Mishnah. V'meis tar milatami b'masa. Come on, and what about the second detail that it doesn't have tumas nevela? Who's that according to? Rabbanan. That's the rabbis, because the rabbis basically say that the shchita is effective for the fetus. So, like, uh, so didn't it come in contact with the mother, right? Who's in the vela? So Gemara says, well, according to Rabbi Chisda, Tamech, Hadatani Rabbi Chia. What about this brisa where Rabbi Chia says Hashochet is a treifa matzah ba ben tishachai? Same case. You slaughter a treifa animal and find a 9-month fetus in it. Ton shchita. The fetus requires shchita. V'chayav Israel chayim v'keva, and you have to give the matnos kahuna. V'im beis tar milutami b'masa. This is exactly what Rabbi Chisda says. Ton shchita command, according to who does it need shchita from Meir? They may start meal time masak rabbanan. Yeah, indeed. The so you're saying that the brisa itself contradicts itself. So Gemara says Rabbi would answer halakasha. That's not a problem. Rabbi Chia im kvar mitzvah meiskama. Rabbi Chia is talking about if you found the fetus dead inside the womb, then it doesn't have tumas nevela. Even Reb Meir would say that the shchita works. The shchita works for it in terms of it not being a nevela. And with the dach kasha, according to you, Rav Chisda, it's still a question, right? You can't explain why the fetus isn't in the vela if it was originally found dead inside the womb. That's not what you're talking about. You're talking about it was found alive and then died. So the shechita of the mother makes it tahor even for a live fetus. So how can you also say that the fetus can be eaten based on the basis of its own shechita? So the answer is not a problem. The same answer we had before, that there's four pipes here that and you just have to do two of them, whether it's the mother's or the child's.
The more earlier talks about a dead fetus inside the mother, and it seems to conclude that that's considered a nevela, because this would be if it's then later if the fetus is extracted, then the bed it would be like an animal that died of its own, and therefore it would be considered a nevela.
Well, that's exactly the machlokas here. That's one view, but another view is that that it underwent shchita by virtue of the mother's shchita, and so it's not in the vela. That's exactly what the machlokas is here, I think. So yeah, your point is well taken, but there's another way to go also. Kisolik Reb Zera, when Reb Zera went to Eretz Yisrael, Ashkechei Rabbi Yassi di Yassi v'kamar leila hashmata. He found Rabbi Yassi teaching this sugya. Amarle, he said, Yishar, well said. Rabbi Yochanan said the same thing. Bichlal Pali Rishon ben Lakish. So what? So you're taking the side of Rabbi Yochanan and not Reish Lakish. Misha Hava Shayle. Um, so Vishasikle. So what he said was that Reish Lakish would basically wait for Rav Yochanan to state his opinion. He would study the opinion, um, and he would take his time before objecting. So, in other words, Reish Lakish may have agreed with Rav Yochanan, or he may not have agreed with Rav Yochanan. He may have digested it first and then later protested. So I know what Rav Yochanan says. I just don't know if Reish Lakish agreed with him, because even if he disagreed, he wouldn't have said so right away. Some say the case was like this: Mishta Havashasi, not Mishtak, not that he was quiet. Reish Lakish was quiet, but Reish Lakish was having a drink. He was drinking his coffee when Rabbi Yochanan was teaching this Vashasi, and that's why he didn't say anything, because his mouth was full. So again, I left before Reish Lakish could say anything. I don't know if he was going to object or not. Rabbi Shimon Shazuri, Omer, Afil. So back to the Mishnah. So we had the Mishnah. We had the Rabbi Meir says you have to do shchita on a ben pekua. The Rabbanan say you don't have to do shchita, and Rabbi Shimon Shazuri says even if the animal could be like 5 years old and walking around, and it still doesn't need shchita. So what's the difference between Rav Shimon Shazuri and the Rabban? Hayatanakama, it's the same opinion. Rav Kana, Hifri Salgawi Karka Ikabinau. Um, um, the difference is whether, according to Rav Shimon Shazuri, um, once it starts walking around, it's still a ben pekua. But according to the rabbis, and we haven't seen this yet, I don't think we've been assuming otherwise. But according to the rabbis, once the animal starts walking around, it's no longer a ben pekua. So it's only ben pekua if it's the mother was shechted, the fetus was extracted, but it wasn't allowed to develop any further. It wasn't allowed to walk around. It can be eaten, killed and eaten right there. But according to the rabbis, ben pekua the status doesn't remain with it. It can lose the status. According to Rav Shimon Shazuri, it keeps its status for its whole life.
So according to him, one would have to shecht it that day, basically the day that it's extracted from the mother.
Yeah.
Or right. Not have to shecht it. That's the point. He would not have to shecht it.
Yeah, exactly. It could be killed and eaten. Exactly. Yeah. In fact, you wouldn't be allowed to shecht it because also v'yasbeno osi shchatu b'yam.
What's that? Say that again.
Also v'yasbeno, the isur of you can't do shchita on a mother and a child on the same day. We can't do that yesterday.
I'm just wondering if that's technically considered a child if it wasn't born yet, if it was extracted.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, okay, good point. Yeah,
because if we considered Yerach Imo, and it wasn't yet born,
that's already considered dead. Yeah.
Then, well, it wasn't dead, but it was. Maybe it was.
So yes, but that would maybe not apply. Yeah. Okay, you're right. I take it back. Okay. Now, Amar Mishashel, Omer Choshin Lazer Ha'av. According, if you hold that that an animal, I mean, obviously an animal has matrilineal descent; it descends from its mother, but doesn't have fatherhood from the father. So if you say yes, ben pekua habal behema malyasa. What if you have a ben pekua that impregnates a normal animal? Right? Havlan ein lo takana. Then it can't be that child of a half ben pekua and half a normal, or the father's a ben pekua and the mother who is a normal thing. It can never be eaten because on one hand it requires shchita. On the other, like from the mother's side, it requires shchita because the mother is not a ben pekua. On the other hand. You can't, if it's a ben pekua, then shchita implies that it's not a ben pekua. Like shchita, it's seen as if it's already been slaughtered, right? So doing shchita on it is ineffective because it's like you can't do shchita on one animal twice, right? So on one hand it requires shchita, on the other hand it's already had shchita, and shchita isn't effective, so you can never eat this animal.
Well, how did it have shchita already?
It effectively has shchita by being a descendant of the father who is a ben pekua.
Well, so this is the grandson? This is like a coin. You carry through the father, and the Yadut comes through the mother. We're applying this to animals. I mean, How long does this go on? Now, how about the son of the son of the son of the Ben Pakuach? I mean, you'll keep track of this. Is there an end to this?
Probably not. Yeah, you need genealogical records for these for this animal. The best thing to do is to eat it as soon as it's born. I mean, the truth is, according to Rabbanan, the problem is only according to Rav Shimon Shazuri. According to Rabbanan, if it survived long enough to become a father, to impregnate another animal, then it's according to Rabbanan, it's no longer a ben pekua, so it's not a problem. But according to Rav Shimon Shazuri, your question is a good question because it
Right.
retains, yeah, because it's going to get passed down. Amar Abaye. Rabbi says, "Hakomani with kolut ben pekua." An
Does this
animal
only
that
apply to a male animal, or does it apply to a female? Can the female pass on the Ben Pekua status, or is it like the male lineage, Cohen and Levi and so forth?
I think it would be. I don't see why it would have to be any different. It would be if the mother was a ben pekua and the father was not. I think it would be the same question. I think so.
Uh-huh.
Don't see why not. Okay, so now we have the question of a kalut. A kalut is an animal that has hooves that aren't split, right? So to be a kosher animal, um, you're supposed to have split hooves, and this one was born with a birth defect. It's a cow, or a sheep, or whatever, but it has joined hooves. So if it's a ben pekua shemutar, then you can still eat it. My tama why? Komilsa de tmia midkar dechire because this is an unusual case, right? Like um, people are going to remember that this is a ben pekua. In other words, it has the ben pekua looks the same as any other animal, but this one, has something unusual about it, and people will remember. Oh yeah, this is the one that was born a ben pekua with joined hooves, and we don't have to worry about it getting mixed up. Um, so what this implies is that the reason that the Rabbanan say in the Mishnah that once it's walking around, it's no longer considered a ben pekua, is because of exactly this problem. How are you going to keep track of it, right? How are people going to know that this is a ben pekua? So if it has some physical characteristic that sets it apart, that people will recognize and mention in the same breath, oh yeah, this is the joint hoof animal, that is a ben pekua, then there's no concern. Okay. Amar Zira Amar Chanina. Ziri says, and then Rav Chanina halacha Rav Shimon ben Shazuri holds like Rav Shimon Shazuri in the Mishnah. B'chein Rav Shimon Shazuri matir bivno v'ven b'no atzav kol adaros. And indeed, what you just said, Ken, is that yes, this gets passed on, through all the descending generations. Rabbi Yochanan Amar hu mutar. The ben pekua itself is mutar without shito b'no aser, but doesn't pass on the status to its offspring. Adabar chavu
So
havale ben.
he's not taking the middle position. So the Rabbanan said it stops. It has to be shechted that day or not shechted,
Right.
eaten that day. And he says, no, this animal, that's what he seems to take a middle opinion, that this animal forever, but not his descendants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but for kind of a little bit different reason, right? This is like a theoretical reason that you don't pass on that status, and the Rabbanan's reason is a practical reason that we don't want to allow this to be considered a ben pekua on an ongoing basis. But practically, you're right; it's the same. Adabar chavu havale ben pekua dunafal duba ale. There was Adabar chavu had this ben pekua animal that was attacked by Dubai assumes a bear. He translates here wolf. I'm not sure
The
why.
duba is usually a bear. Dubi is a bear usually.
Yeah, let's see. Rashi says Hazev Tarfo. Okay, I don't know why that is, but basically it was killed by an animal, by a wild animal. Also coming to Ravashi, so he went to Ravashi. Amalei Zil Shachte, go and do shchita on it. So it wasn't dead yet, I guess. It was still alive. So Ravashi says, like, do shchita on it, and then you can eat it. So Amalei, Hamar Zero, Amar Chanina, Halacha Shimon Shazuri. Like, why did it's a Ben Pekua? What does it need Shechita for? I could have just eaten it, I could have killed it any way I wanted to. What does it matter? Got attacked by a wild animal. And that not only does the Ben Pekua retain its status for its lifetime, but even passes it on to future generations. But Rabbi Yochanan, even Rabbi Yochanan, who disagreed with Ziri, says that the offspring of the Ben Pekua requires shchita, but not the Ben Pekua itself. Like the whole point of a Ben Pekua is it doesn't need shchita. Why did I say it needs shchita? Rabbi Yochanan, Divrei Rabbi Shimon Shizuri Kamar. Rabbi Yochanan is saying, according to Rabbi Shimon Shizuri, um, um, the Ben Pekua itself, but not the offspring. But he didn't mean to rule that way. But didn't Ravin say halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Shizuri? We have a statement that halacha is like Rabbi Shimon Shizuri. So why do you care how the animal was killed? It's a Ben Pekua. And not only that, so anywhere Rabbi Shimon Shizuri says something in the Mishnah, we go by him for la halacha. I have a different, relying on a different opinion. Not in every Mishnah, but in the case of, in these following cases, a case of a dangerously ill person. We'll see in a minute what that is. And there's other ruling. We'll see what both these are in a minute. So not that Rav Shimon Shazuri is always right. Rav Shimon Shazuri is right in these cases. Misukan, what is the case of an ill person, a dangerously ill person? Titnan, Brishona Hayu Amrim, first is Hadayose Bakolar, if you're being led out to execution in chains, Vyamar Kisu Get Lishti, and you say, you call out somebody write a get for my wife. So she'll be a divorcee and not a widow. Harelu Yichtuvu V'yinu. So that instruction is valid. You can go and write a get for the wife on his as his shaliach. Chazru lamar, but then they changed their minds. Afa mafarish vayotze b'shayra. Not change their minds, but they added to this not only someone who's about to be executed, but even someone who's going out in a caravan, right? So going on a dangerous trip. And you're leaving, you say, write a get for my wife, you can do that. Rabbi Shimon Shazuri Omer, Afa Masuka. Even someone who's very sick, very ill, and he says, write a get for my wife, you can follow that instruction. And what's the other case where we rule like Rav Shimon Shazuri? Trumas Maser Shel Demai. Ditzanan, we have a Mishnah. Trumas Maser Shel Demai Shechazra Lim Koma. You have Trumas Maser you have Demai, which you don't know its status, and you take Trumas Maser from it, and then it gets mixed back into the original, the initial pile or bushel or whatever of produce. Rabbi Shimon Shazuri Omer Afbechol Shalom. You can so really what you can do is you can ask the Amaretz, right? Demai is you don't know the status. You bought something from an Amaretz, and so the rabbis say, listen, we don't know if the guy keeps the rules of Truma and Maser. Maybe he didn't take Truma and Maser. It's called Demai. So go ask the guy, did you take Truma and Maser? And you can take his word for it because it's only a drabanan. Like really, we really the majority of farmers, even Amei Haaretz, do take Truma and Maser. But because of the concern of the significant minority, the rabbi said, we're not going to allow it. Right? We're going to make sure you assume that they didn't. Okay, but in the case where there's where it's difficult, you could always go ask the guy, hey, did you take Truma and Maser, and take him at his word.
Isn't there a Mishnah that makes a distinction between Truma to the Kohen that we would in that case we would believe the Amaretz, but if it's Meiser Sheni, we don't believe him? I thought I remember in Chagiga maybe that we do make a distinction on that. What is more Chamor, we believe him, but what would be less Chamor, we don't necessarily believe him.
Right. I think that's why we're talking. I think that's why we're talking about Trumas Maser, right? Which is essentially Truma, right? Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right. Why aren't we asking the question about truma itself? I don't know. We'd probably say the same thing about truma, I suppose. I don't know. Okay, we will stop here.
So there's a Gemara. It's actually the Mishnah in Ayin Beit Amid Beit where it says it's a Mamatzina, but Treifa Shishchitata mitarata af shchita behema titayer. And they ask a question in the Gemara, but the Gemara seems to state there categorically clearly that shchita of a treifa prevents it becoming tame, prevents it from a nevela status. So it wouldn't be matame. The question I had learning that Gemara is what does it, and so then one cannot eat it in any because it was a treifa. But I'm wondering, is that the limit? I was wondering there whether it would allow it. It was, I think it was talking about there later about that wasn't the issue there, but it referred. I was reading commentary, question about kachim, and I don't. So the question I had was whether it would allow that to be put on the mizbeach, but I don't think though. I think it just doesn't allow it to be nevela to be matame, but shchita because the animal was kosher from the beginning. It was a kosher animal. Then the Torah allows it to be shechted, as even though it's a treifa. That was the point here. That was Ahmed. What do you call Ayin Beit? The beginning, the top of I'm gonna say Ayin Beit, Ahmed Beit, the very top there. So I mean that's the initial statement of the Gemara. And it goes through a whole shachar v'tarya, and it compares it to the limb, whether the same thing applies to a limb that's extended from the vaginal canal of the animal, and that's all a different discussion. But the Gemara, then I mean, the beginning, the point is that and I think he quotes that the Gemara allows one to shech the treifa. The treifa can still be shechted to prevent that animal from becoming a nevela that would be matame. Whereas nevela is matame and treifa is not matame.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll call it here for today. Have a good day, everybody.